Islamic fundamentalism and the rise of the ISIL state. And it's something that cannot be treated lightly, and we won't go into depth, because if we do, I'll be here for the next 2 hours. But I will certainly touch on what I believe to be the most critical and important issues. And of course, as far as I'm concerned, this is the issue of our time. And it's something that we all need to get a clear understanding about, not just for our country, Nigeria, but also for the entire world. There are a number of evils that have afflicted the world. I call them the great evils. And what you'll find when it comes to world history is that when these challenges come, humanity rises up to resist them. The first, I would say, was probably the rulership of the great monarchs in Europe and the great evil that resulted in the First World War. That's Kaiser Wilhelm, who was the king of Germany, who rose up and decided he was going to conquer the whole world, and he caused a war. The rest of the world rose up to resist him and his tyranny. They came together, they fought him, and at the end of the day, 20 million people were killed in that war. It was a 4-year war, it was a world war, the first of its kind, and it was a terrible thing, but at the end of the day, good triumphed over evil. The second challenge that we had was the Second World War, when Nazism and Hitler's people rose up and decided to conquer the world. Again, righteous men, good men from all over the world joined hands. Many from Nigeria, a lot of people don't know this. Our people fought in Burma at that time. Many from all over Africa joined hands with the good forces in Europe, in America, and elsewhere. They rose up against fascism, and they defeated Hitler, and the world was delivered from what I would describe as the second great evil. The third was communism. That was far more complex and far more difficult. There wasn't a hot war, a war of bullets. Not that many people were killed. Incidentally, let me just say, to go back a step, the Second World War resulted in the death of 50 million people. 50 million people died as a consequence of Hitler and his activities and the Second World War. To communism, it took a much longer time to defeat this great evil, godless empire, an evil empire. But eventually, because, again, righteous men came together and fought it, it was eventually defeated. And the Berlin Wall came down in 1990, and Eastern Europe was liberated. Eventually, the Soviet Union fell apart, and the world is a far better and safer place for it. Thousands of people died during that Cold War, all over the world, because Africa, South America, and so many other places were the theaters of war. It was a proxy war. But at the end of the day, the forces of good, the forces of light prevailed, and communism was defeated. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the fourth great evil that we are confronted with today, that humanity has to face down and respond to effectively, is what I call the rise of Islamic fundamentalism. It is not the rise of Islam, because Islamic fundamentalism is different to Islam. It's a completely different thing. And it is a great disservice to the great faith of Islam to describe Islamic fundamentalism as being Islam at all. It is a completely different thing. But this is what we're confronted with. It's a global war. A situation where those I describe as the Islamists, the Islamic fundamentalists, are determined to set up a caliphate that is ruled by the strictest form of Sharia law, 6th century AD Sharia law, implemented and ensure that every person, every man, woman, and child is subject to this law. And we define it by saying that the ultimate objective is to eliminate all other faiths, to create a situation whereby our values and our value system and that which the entire world has fought to establish over the last hundreds of years is wiped away, simply because some people believe that their own version of Islam should be imposed on the rest of humanity. They wish to enslave us. They wish to convert the world into their own form and brand of Islam. They wish to kill, maim, destroy, and stigmatize as many people as necessary to effect that. They wish to enslave women. They wish to destroy the lives of young people, and they wish to impose their will on the rest of humanity. This, in my view, is evil. And not only is it evil, what makes it even worse is the fact that they're prepared to do it by the usage of violence, undiluted and the most extreme form of violence. This is what we're confronted with today in the world. It's not just in Africa, it's not just in Nigeria, it's everywhere in the world. And of course, if you watch the news only for 1 hour, every day you see the atrocities that are being committed in the name of Islamic fundamentalism. This is something that I believe that the whole of humanity has to rise up to fight against. Both Muslims and Christians, all righteous men and women throughout the world, just as they fought against the Kaiser, they fought against Hitler, they fought against communism. Today, this is the challenge of our day, the challenge of our time, for us to come together and fight this great evil. And let me come to the Nigerian experience. We really never had any issues of religion in this country. We all got on, and most of us still get on very well. This is a country that espouses the values of humanity. That is to say, whether you're Christian or Muslim really is not an issue. What is important is that you can express yourself and practice your religion in as peaceful and as normal a way as possible without anybody imposing their will on you. And we've always managed to get on in that way. Some parts of our country are a little bit more complicated than others. But by and large, I believe that since 1960 and independence, we've done a pretty good job when it comes to that. However, there were some issues. And I need to go back a little bit to tell you how it all started in my view. And I stand to be corrected on this. Of course, this is just my opinion. I'm pretty conversant with our history, and I try to do my research. I do not mean to offend anybody with what I'm about to say, but say it I will because it's my perspective, it's my view, and I stand to be corrected on anything that I say here. In my own view, the first glimpse of the possibility of challenge that we may end up having came in 1979 in this country, or right at 1978, at the Constitutional Conference, where some of our greatest minds and greatest men of that day gathered together to establish a new constitution. And at that time, the northern part of the country, led by Shehu Shagari, Alhaji Shehu Shagari, who later became the president of our country, ironically, and a number of others. And of course, they reflected the mindset of most of the people from the north, particularly the northern Muslims at the time, quite rightly, stated the fact that, look, as far as they are concerned, civil Sharia law ought to be part of the constitution. The rest of the country, the rest of the delegates resisted it and said no. Then the northerners staged a walkout. Eventually, the Obasanjo regime came together and said, listen, it's important that you allow the people of the north, the northern Muslims, to espouse their own customary law, which is Sharia law. That is civil Sharia law, not criminal Sharia law. And therefore, it ought to be included in the constitution, and they put it there. I believe that was the right decision that they took at the time. I think it's something that ought to be defended and ought to have been allowed. However, if it had stopped there, perhaps we wouldn't have had as many challenges as we do today. Unfortunately, it went a little bit further. The rise of Islamic activism became more pronounced as time went by, but it didn't actually manifest itself, particularly in the north. It didn't really manifest itself until much later, again during Shagari's regime, I'd say around 1980-81, when the Maitatsini riots and the Maitatsini phenomenon took place in various parts of the north, specifically in Kanu, where they were very, very strong. This was a very powerful sect that killed so many people and terrorized the north. Well, eventually the good news is this, that they were suppressed and they were defeated. A man by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Akilu at that time led the onslaught against them, and they were defeated. Marwa, who was their leader, who later was described as Maitatsini, I believe they called him that, but his real name was Marwa. He was from the Cameroons. He was killed. Most of his followers were eliminated, and I think that was a testimony to the courage and the goodness of our armed forces and the governments of that day. They did an excellent job, and they crushed it, and they eliminated it. It didn't stop there, unfortunately. It went on. Babangida eventually came into power. When he came into power, Nigeria became a member of the OIC, a very contentious move, which a lot of people felt was inappropriate. As far as I'm concerned, the appropriateness of that particular move is neither here nor there. The fact is that it happened, and in my view, it encouraged so many of those forces within our country that believed that perhaps we should go a step further. It encouraged them, and it created some level of conflict within our country. But again, you didn't see Islamic fundamentalism in our country at that time. It didn't manifest itself fully. In my view, the first manifestation of Islamic fundamentalism came under the regime. I mean, apart from Maitatsini, apart from Marwa and co. But very, very serious manifestation came under the government of General Sani Abacha. And many of us resisted Abacha and fought him throughout. Many of us did not appreciate him. Many of us did not support his government. But one thing I'll tell you is this. It's one thing he did that, as far as I'm concerned, no other Nigerian head of state or president has ever done. General Sani Abacha fought Islamic fundamentalism more than any other head of state we've ever had in this country. And I'll tell you why. It was under his watch that the real manifestation of fundamentalism first came. And it wasn't just a sect, it was a widespread phenomenon. Many of our young professionals went to the Sudan. Many of them learned at the feet of Osama bin Laden, who was in exile, living in Sudan at the time, and a man by the name of Al-Turabi, who was one of the opposition leaders in the Sudan. Many of our young people, young professionals, educated young men and women went there and came back to Nigeria with these completely unacceptable ideas about establishing an Islamic fundamentalist state. And you saw this thing unfolding by the day. Perhaps the most vivid example that I'll share with you today, as unpleasant as it is the experience of a man by the name of Mr. Gideon Akaluka. Now, many people had been slaughtered over that period, but I'm going to use this particular case in order to illustrate a point to you today. There's a man by the name of Gideon Akaluka who was in a Kanu police station. He had been charged with something, he was being kept there. It was alleged that he desecrated the Quran. I won't go further than that he desecrated the Quran. And the response of those that organized for his murder was this. They mobilized the crowd. They stormed the police station. They dragged him out. They cut off his head. And by the way, they filmed all this. This was all filmed. It was released. It's something that was viewed by millions of Nigerians at the time on television. They put his head on a pole and they paraded it and started screaming and shouting and rejoicing at the fact that they had done this. And his crime was that somehow or other, they alleged that he had desecrated the Quran. The country was in a state of utter shock. This sort of thing had never happened. It had never been so graphic, and people had not rejoiced about it as much as they did at that time. And of course, these things are not often filmed. This one was filmed. And the people that filmed it were happy to allow the whole of Nigeria to see what they had done. Now, the result of it was this. General Sani Abacha rose to the occasion, and they established the fact that 9 people had organized this horrific act. There were 9 of them. All 9 of them had recently returned from the Sudan. All 9 of them had trained there. All 9 of them were committed to establishing an Islamic fundamentalist state in this country. And all 9 of them were ready to employ violence in order to achieve their objectives. What Abacha did was interesting and unique. Instead of rationalizing it, trying to explain it away like so many of our leaders do today, he simply ordered that the 9 should be fished out and they should be eliminated. They should be killed. And he told his people that he was not ready to accept this type of evil in Nigeria at that time or at any time. And he was very decisive. It was a military government, a real soldier. And what happened? All 9 of them were fished out. 8 of them were killed, but 1 of them was not killed. The question is why? It's a good question. I'm still asking that question today. I am told that he had such strong connections and that the president was lied to by the IG of police at the time and those that were in charge of what was essentially an extrajudicial killing. And the man was taken from Kanu because he had strong connections. And he was hidden in a Sokoto prison for 2 years. Abacha thought he was dead. After 2 years, I won't mention his name here, so nobody needs to have, a fast heartbeat and all the rest of it. But everybody knows who it is, but I will not mention his name here because it's not appropriate, it's not necessary, it's just illustrating a fact. Now, he was in a Sokoto prison for 2 years. Eventually, he was released. Again, people intervened. They approached Abacha and said, well, he has repented, we didn't kill him, allow him to live his life. And the relatively young man was shipped down to Lagos, where he went in, continued his career, went into a career, I won't say which sector, and he flourished and he did very, very well. That is what eventually happened on that case. This was a man that participated, organized the filming of a murder of a fellow Nigerian, and yet he managed to get away with it. That, for me, was the beginning, probably, of all our challenges and problems. Now, Obasanjo came to power. Obasanjo, the former head of state, my boss, the man who I have tremendous respect for and who I will always regard as a father to me, in my view, in the first 4 years, made a very serious mistake in his handling of the issue of criminal Sharia, what was later to be described as political Sharia. At that time, 2000, 2001 or thereabouts, a young governor in Zamfara state, Governor Ahmed Sani, decided that the only way he could shore up his popularity in Zamfara and defeat the forces that were ranged against him, including the present Minister of Defense, General Aliyu Gusau and others, was to use religion. So what did he do? He now introduced Sharia. I don't need to go into it, you all know the story. He now introduced criminal Sharia law and said this was the right of every Muslim and this was what ought to be the case. And this is something that he insisted on doing. Now, the response of the federal government at the time, and I said it at the time, I wasn't in government, but I criticized Obasanjo effectively. I wrote articles and I discussed it with him before I joined his government passionately. We had a passionate argument about this issue. But I believe that at that point, he should have put his foot down and said, thus far and no further. Nigeria is a secular state. There's every space for civil Sharia law, but there's no space at all for the practice of criminal laws that are alien to our constitution. And I believe he ought to have done that, but he didn't. He said it would fizzle out, and he said that we should ignore, or that he would ignore them, and eventually the whole problem would go away. And he also said that they were trying to provoke him into a civil war. My response to that was that civil wars have been fought many times over. No matter what it is, that it will cost you. If you see evil, you must cut its head off. You must fight it. You must confront it. And you must never say that you will step back because you don't want to fight. Because the minute you do that, it creates problems for you. In any case, he stepped back from the brink. Political Sharia fizzled out. It fizzled out. Ahmed Sani, I think, realized that he made a big mistake. It fizzled out. And eventually, though, it didn't end there. The seeds for Boko Haram had been planted. And those that believed in using the great faith of Islam in order to effect a political agenda, and in order to use it to intimidate the federal government and others, and employ it for means that it's not meant to be employed for, realized that this is something they could do. And of course, it manifested again a number of years later in the form of Boko Haram. Let me just quickly say that in between that time and when Boko Haram eventually started to commit its atrocities, a number of things happened. Again, we missed it again. When the same character, the governor, Ahmed Yarima, brought another interesting innovation into the affairs of our country. By now, he's a senator. He had joined the Senate. And what he did was that he traveled to Egypt. He came back to our country with a young bride of 12 years old. He brought the young girl to Abuja here, and he married her. And then he took her back to Zamfara state. Now, under our laws, that is the laws that apply in Abuja and most of the country, not all, but certainly in Abuja, there's something called the Child Marriage Act, which forbids the marriage of young children. That law has not been ratified in various parts of the core north because the state house assemblies refused to ratify it. But it has been ratified in the rest of the country, and certainly it applies in Abuja. The government of the day saw fit to allow a situation to arise whereby this man, this senator, a distinguished member of our society, could marry this girl here. There was a bit of hue and cry, but eventually nothing happened and he got away with it. Not only that, he boasted about it. Interesting to note that Egypt is a Muslim country, at least it has a Muslim majority. But in Egypt, if he had done that, he would have been arrested, he would have been prosecuted, and he would have been jailed. Yet in Nigeria, he managed to get away with it. From that point on, what I call the rise of pedophilia, because this is what it is, in the affairs of our people, and also the agenda to suppress women, humiliate them, and to destroy the lives of young children, particularly the girl child, began to manifest more and more in this country. It was done with impunity. Nobody was ready to stand up. A few people did, and I know that Zainab and a few others made contributions to this debate on varying sides, but a few, particularly northern women, stood up. Other than that, the Senate didn't really care. Our political leaders didn't care. Nobody cared. It got to a point that various diseases which are associated with child rape and child sex, just went nuclear in the north. And we had the dubious record of having, I've forgotten the name of the disease now, fistula or something. I don't even like to think about it. But we had the dubious distinction of having more children in this country that are young girls that are afflicted with that disease. It comes as a consequence of sex with young girls. And it completely destroys their internal organs. And Nigeria had the dubious distinction of suffering, of having more sufferers from that disease than any other country in the world as a consequence of the activities of people like Ahmed Yerima. As this was going on, the slaughter of Christians continued in the north. That never stopped. I must say, however, that it was a mutual thing. It wasn't just Muslims killing Christians. Christians also killed Muslims, which is very unfortunate. To the point, and I'm ashamed to say this because I'm a Christian, to the point that in, I believe it was in Plateau in Jos, I saw a video of a group of Christian youths, so-called Christian youths, Berom youths, that not only killed their Muslim brothers and sisters, but they also cooked them and ate them on the film. That is the level of barbarity, the religious fundamentalism, not just Islamic fundamentalism, Christian fundamentalism got to in this country in the last few years. So this continued. Churches were burnt, people were killed, various local problems. Immediately you would have all the conflicts. Nothing was done to stop it, and we continued to lose our way. Then came the big one. From 2010, 2011, Boko Haram began its onslaught. They told us all that they were committed to establishing an Islamic fundamentalist state either in the whole of the north or in parts of the north. They told us they were committed to wiping out Christianity, wiping out moderate Islam, which is the true form of Islam, and killing every single person that did not share their own interpretation of the great faith of Islam. They went from strength to strength. Before we knew it, 30,000 of our people between 2011 to date had been killed, probably more, but in this country, when 100 people are killed, they'll tell you only 10. Conservative figure, 30,000 of our people have been killed. Hundreds and hundreds of churches have been burnt to the ground. Towns have been taken over. The Boko Haram flag is flying in virtually 50% of the areas in some of our states in the northeast today. And I might add this, that most of the towns they've taken, like Mubi, are actually predominantly Christian towns. They have now given it another name. I cannot remember what the name is, but the translation is a center of Islam and peace, or something like that. They've changed it from Mubi. They're flying their flag there. This is what they've been doing to us. They have unleashed complete war against our nation. Our soldiers are being killed morning, day, and night. And you know, a lot of people forget the fact that these soldiers also have families. I was on a plane recently with the Minister of Defense and Minister of State for Defense, and there was one particular person who was a very young girl. She was about 21, 22. Her name is Naomi Abegunde. It's relevant, and I'll tell you why I'm mentioning this. This girl couldn't have been more than about 22 years old. And she was in full uniform. You know, she was in the Air Force. It was an Air Force jet we were traveling in. And, you know, I asked her, I said, you know, if you're called to go to the war front tomorrow to go and drop bombs or fight or whatever it is that the Air Force will do over there, would you be ready to go? She looked at me in the face and she said she's ready to go any day, any time. I said, are you ready to die? She said, that's what she's paid to do. And it occurred to me then that so many of our young people are out there in uniform, police, SSS, the army, the navy, in the Northeast and in various parts of the North, being killed every day. And yet nobody seems to care. We do not honor them. Instead, we criticize them morning, day, and night, yet they are giving their lives. That is where we have got to in this country. We are in a full-scale war. Now, let me just quickly say the full manifestation of the tribulations that we're facing came in the case of the Chibok girls, which we are all familiar with. But I will share, if I may, just a few words here about what some of you may not know about what happened with the Chibok girls. And I've said this over and over again, and the responses I have received have not been satisfactory because everybody is running away from speaking the truth. But the truth you will hear today, and I stand to be corrected. What happened on the case of the Chibok girls? What really happened? Who was to blame? The objective is to get the girls back. We all know this. And we pray for it, and we yearn for it every day. But before you solve a problem, you must first establish what the cause was, who caused it, and cause people to be accountable, particularly politicians like myself, and governors, and senators, and ministers, and presidents, and so on. Everybody must be held accountable for his actions. Otherwise, the impunity will continue. What happened? The schools have been closed down. The federal government wrote to the governor of Borno State that they must not allow any exams to take place. He was desirous of the exams taking place in Chibok. So he told them, well, they will proceed and he will guarantee the security of these girls. WAEC wrote to him and said, it is not advisable. These exams must not take place. That area is too dangerous. Let the schools remain closed. And if you want the exams to take place, let all the children be shipped to Maiduguri so that the exams can be done there. He told them that he would guarantee their security, the exams would take place in Chibok, and that nothing would happen. And the next thing, they called all the children back. Now, the interesting about it is this. That school was not just for girls. It was for girls and boys. But when the exams had taken place, the school authorities sent all the boys home. Not only that, they sent home all the girls that were related to the staff. In other words, the children of the principal, the children of the teachers, the children of anybody that was associated or related to members of the staff of that school. They were all asked to go home. The only people that slept in that school that night were the girls that did not have relatives or parents as members of the staff or school authorities, and the boys. And what happened? Almost 300 girls were left there. Where was the security? The governor who had promised to provide security provided no security at all. There was one man at the gate, that was all. Just one man, the gatekeeper, and he wasn't even armed. Not only that, there was no matron, no principal, no adult in the school with that girl through that night. Not only that, there was no NEPA, no light, no power. So you didn't have electricity. There was a generator in the school. They did not put any diesel in the generator. So those little girls were there all alone, without any adult supervision, in the dark, with no armed men around them, no security, no nothing. And of course, at 3 a.m. in the morning, the Haramites came, burnt down the school, stole the food, abused the girls, herded them into lorries as if they were animals, and took them to the Sambisa forest. And there, they remain till today. And I have to say this, because perhaps if I say it, people will understand the importance of taking these matters seriously and holding our leaders to account. There they are till today, being raped, being humiliated, being abused, being degraded, being enslaved, just as Shekau said he would do. This is a man that does not mince words, and he always does what he says. And of course, they've sold quite a few of them abroad to wealthy Arab leaders that are interested in young girls. This is what has happened. That's the reality. And we need to live with it and accept it and understand that until we stand up to it and until we hold our leaders accountable, this sort of thing will continue. Now, let me just say, because I don't have much time left, that there's a local dimension to this and there's an international dimension. That is to the move of Islamic fundamentalism in our country. Al-Qaeda is involved. They are funding this initiative, just as ISIL is being funded by various interests from all over the world. Al-Qaeda is involved, and various other groups in the Middle East are funding Boko Haram. There's also a local content, in my view. I won't go much into that, and I don't want us to be diverted into politics here, because I don't think this is a political forum. But it is important to say that I believe there are also many people within this country in high places that are also supporting and funding Boko Haram, simply because they want to use that vessel, they want to use that group in order to destabilize this country and cause a change in government. What they fail to appreciate is the fact that when you ride on the back of a tiger, it'll eventually consume you as well. This whole idea that you can control these guys, you can stop them, you can turn off whatever is buzzing them and causing them to do what they do when you feel like it, is completely erroneous. And it's something that these people that are supporting Boko Haram, encouraging Boko Haram, I mean, there are some people in this country that rejoice, believe it or not, whenever a bomb goes off and people are killed. And they cite it as evidence of the government's weakness. And therefore, the president and the government must go. And this is our evidence of it. And they criticize the government morning, day, and night. Yes, we all agree that the government ought to do more and can do more. But the first line of criticism, the first condemnation, the first insult and abuse, and the first rage must be reserved for those that are in Boko Haram, and those that sponsor them, and those that wish to kill you and I, and change our way of life, and enslave our children, and destroy our future. That is where our primary rage is meant to be targeted. I don't see enough of it in this country. People will get up and condemn and criticize the government, fine. But what about Boko Haram itself? How many of our political leaders have risen up to condemn them morning, day, and night? How many of them have the courage to do so? They don't do it, because most of them are scared to do it. And most of them will tell you privately that if we begin to do this, they will come after us. When will we get to a point that our leaders are prepared to put their lives on the line, just like Naomi Abegunde did, or is doing in the Nigerian Air Force, just as all those children that are being slaughtered on the war front are doing? When will our leaders be ready to do that? I sincerely hope that it will be sooner than later. So essentially what it is this: we need to play our role in this global war. Now, the greatest challenge that we face in this country is not the February elections. Elections come and go. Politicians come and go. One set is here today, another will come tomorrow. They're quite expendable. The only thing that is not expendable is this country and its unity. And I'll tell you what, the greatest challenge that we face is not the February elections next year, but the fight against Boko Haram. That is the challenge of the day. That is the challenge of our time. Now, let me just quickly say before I end, the experiences of other countries when it comes to Islamic fundamentalism. Let me tell you something that will shock many of you, or at least it will surprise some of you. Over 90% of Muslim countries on the planet today are secular states, where Sharia criminal law is not practiced, completely rejected, and it is regarded as being unacceptable. I'll tell you which countries they are, because many people find this hard to believe. Turkey is one. Probably the most powerful, the most respected Islamic country on the planet today. It's a secular state. They said no to Islamic fundamentalism. Algeria is another. Pakistan is fighting it. Afghanistan is another. Egypt is another. Indonesia, which has the largest Muslim population on the planet, is another. India is not a Muslim country, but it has the second largest concentration of Muslims in the world within its borders. It's a secular state. Malaysia is another one. Tunisia, Libya, the UAE, Dubai, we all love going there. It's a country that does not espouse Sharia criminal law. Somalia, they're fighting it, and so many other places. It is only in Iran and in Saudi Arabia and one or two other places that you have the full practice of criminal Sharia law. So the point being this, are we saying, really, that 90% of Muslims on this planet are not as good as the 10% that insist on using or implementing criminal Sharia law, cutting people's arms off, stoning women for adultery, and so on and so forth? I don't think so. What they did in that country, which many other countries have refused to do, is to stand up to the evil. In Turkey, Kemal Atatürk, the founder of that nation, killed over 1 million Islamic fundamentalists in order to wipe it out and create a secular state. The result is this, that you have a country that is today highly industrialized, the best economy in the whole of the Muslim world, the best army, the most respected, the most effective, and the most feared. And they're effectively part of Europe, even though they haven't been formally accepted. That is the result of what Kemal Atatürk did. And he did a good job. He didn't just kill Muslims, by the way. Before they say I said that I enjoyed the fact that I didn't enjoy the killing of anybody. What I'm saying is that he did what he had to do, just as the world did what it had to do when we were faced with Hitler, when we were faced with communism, and when we were faced with the Kaiser. People had to die in order to ensure that evil was defeated. And Kemal Atatürk ensured that. He also, by the way, killed about 800,000 Christian Armenians who were trying to create their own country. But that's a subject for another day. Okay, and that's not such a good thing. It's a terrible thing. Now, how do we end, and what do I have to say to you? What I have to say is this, that despite the challenges that we're facing in our country today, indeed the whole world is facing, we see ISIL making gains in Iraq, in Syria, and so on and so forth. Despite all this, there is a saying, they say that dark may be the night, but joy comes in the morning. Our joy will come in this country and on this planet, and this evil will be defeated. They say that where there is no test, there cannot be a testimony. They say that where there is no mess, there cannot be a message. We've been tested in this country. We're being tested now. But from this test will come a testimony. We're in a mess right now. But from this mess will eventually come our message. They say there is no victory without a challenge. They say there is no rising to the top of the mountain without first touching the bottom of the valley. They say there's no gain without pain. We're going through pain, but we shall certainly see the gain of it. They say there's no victory without tribulation. We're going through tribulations, but we shall certainly have the victories. I have to tell you today not to leave here saddened or worried about the future of Nigeria, because I assure you that we shall prevail and we shall defeat the evil that we are confronted with. Nigeria shall be great again. We are the strength and the power of Black Africa. We're the hope of the black man on this planet. And we will not be defeated. We will not be defeated. I thank you all for this opportunity to say a few words. Let me just end by saying this one thing. Because we love God, whether you're a Christian or a Muslim or whatever you are, because we love God in this country, probably more than most, God's love will never depart from us. Our future is strong. Our future is bright. Let's hold on to the dream. Let's make it together. God bless you. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.